All right, goodness me, it is Thursday already. Where does the time go? And in a change to the advertised live stream, today I thought we would talk about something that's been plaguing a few of us over the last few months is which capture card should we be getting to do things like this for live streaming, recorded stuff, and all that kind of thing. And that is, where's my little thing on now? That is the topic of today. Which capture card should we be choosing? And to talk to me or with me with this subject, which is a bone of contention for a number of people, is my esteemed guest. We have Brian back live on the show to help us out. Thank you, Brian, again for coming into the show today. And we're going to be, we're going to have a chat now about things that we need to be able to do this type of work. And do we go down the route of getting a crazy big capture card and plugging in as many cameras and things as we can, or do we just need this horrible device, the Camlink, and what options do we have to that? So you've been recently going through a bit of a dilemma of trying to switch out your gear from Camlinks like the rest of us. And I think you had, how many? 3 or 4 Camlinks at one point?
I've got 3. I'm going to fan them out like a deck of cards. Yeah, there we go.
Right. There it is. Yeah. 3 Camlinks.
And yeah. Elgato could make a fortune if they just change this to USB-C. Like the fact that you can still buy these today as USB-A is baffling. But yeah, I have those 3 Camlinks.
There's a crazy statistic that states that I don't think the Camlinks have been updated for, is it 5 years or 6 years since they've been out now? They've been around for a long time. And, it's the old thing, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we don't live in a world now where we have everything's USB-A. It's USB-A, right? What they're using currently, yeah. I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, USB-C would be a welcome addition, and they have brought out a few different cards at the moment. So talk me through what you actually started off with then. So when you were doing the YouTube videos and you're recording and doing the lives, but recording you still need to have a capture card of some kind, irrespective of whether you're going live or not. So did you start with the Camlink then? Was that the first thing you started with, or did you go USB-C output from your camera into your system?
No, I always use the Camlink because it's a good question. I mean, I've used these things for years, and I mean, I've used them up until last week when I upgraded to what we'll talk about in part, the Blackmagic Decklink Quad HDMI recorder. And it was fine. The thing is, I always used multiple Camlinks. So at minimum 2, but sometimes I've had 3 Camlinks connected, and I guess I never really understood that can cause issues. So,
right.
But I never connected my camera directly to my computer via USB-C. Either the camera I had didn't support it, or I just thought I already had this thing, so I might as well use it. So, yeah.
And I was the same as you. So I started my sort of journey. Well, originally when I was doing just video on demand stuff, I'd record everything in camera to the SD card, clap at the beginning, record externally to an external audio recorder. I think I had a Zoom H4n or something like that.
Yep.
Everybody has the same gear, right? It's either the Zoom or something that people would use. It's a good bit of kit. There's nothing wrong with it. Didn't have the greatest preamps on the Zoom Z4n. Could be a little bit noisy if you had a mic that really needed some gain. But I used to use this Lewitt Pro condenser mic, which was really good because it didn't require a ton of gain. So that's where I started, recording just like that, throwing everything into Final Cut, editing, no problem. But then venturing into doing something a bit more elaborate like live streaming, you think, well, how do I get this video into my system? And like you, there wasn't many choices when I was looking. I thought, well, my GH5 at the time there was no USB connectivity into the camera. I couldn't even get 720 out of it or something like that. It just wasn't supported. So you have to have a capture card of some kind just to take that HDMI feed out. And of course, being the quality guy that I tried to be, I thought, well, I've got to get 4K out of this camera, right, and throw it in. So
Right.
what will take 4K? So I went down the route in Amazon of looking at every capture card and looking at the reviews. And we know that you can buy a capture card right now for about $20 on Amazon. And you take your chance, and it may or may not work. So I think I started actually, I think I did buy, and I think I still have it, that $20 capture card. And it actually had USB-C, which was great, and just a HDMI import. But it was terrible at best. I think I could only squeeze like 1080 out of it. I only really shoot at 24, 25 frames a second anyway, so it wasn't too bad. But I know that I read some reviews later of the gamers who wanted to get 60 frames a second, fastest frame rate possible. There was no pass-through, it was just a single connection. And it was just
Right.
it was just pretty bad. It would just it would get really hot, it would freeze. So, I thought, well, let's have a look. What does everybody use? And of course, everybody uses these things because they seem to be
Right.
everywhere. Elgato's a pretty decent company. So went ahead and bought one. And like you then, I'm thinking, well, maybe I want to have another camera. So then you buy another Camlink. And then I'd acquired another camera. I thought, well, let's just try 3. And then that's it. And even Elgato themselves say that you really shouldn't have any more than 2 of these Camlinks on a system. And when we say system, really you should only have 1 per USB bus. So on a Mac right now, if you just buy a Mac, it has 1 USB bus and you should just plug 1 in. And then if you get a sort of an OWC or a CalDigit extension hub, which is powered, then that's fine. But then you should have only the second one plugged into that as well. Having 2 Camlinks connected in the same Mac on the same USB bus can cause problems, especially if you've got high frame rates and things. So I guess you had some issues as well, right, with yours when you tried to do that.
I did. So in between the Camlink and the Decklink, I actually had one of these guys. So this is this is a card by Magewell, and this is a max of a 1080 60 frames per second. It's got 2 HDMI ports on it.
Cool.
But yeah, and so it's a PCIe card. So I'm a Mac guy like you, and with the exception of the Mac Pro, which I'd never used, there is no expandability in terms of those kinds of peripherals. So we have to, on top of the cost of this, which was at the time quite expensive, I had to buy a Thunderbolt enclosure, something that has PCIe support. So I got this enclosure by Sonnet, and it worked great for a while until Apple switched to their own silicon. And because these cards are driver based,
Right.
and the company was shady at best. I'll give them credit because they, it was the communication, the language barrier was really, really like it was tough. But they did deliver me like a beta driver a while ago, and every year when Apple would update Mac OS, it would be this kind of like dance that I would have to do with them because something always broke. And finally, I said, you know what, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore. Plus, the drivers eventually really started to mess with my Mac. So I just went with the Camlinks because they were kind of a path of least resistance for me. You just plug it in. But I never really considered the fact that, this isn't really a very robust, processor, especially if you're sending in such a high resolution, high frame rate footage. I would always just do 4K 30. That's generally what I do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it all came to a head a couple of weeks ago in the videos on my YouTube channel. It was like, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was after I moved into this studio, so everything was set up properly. And the footage, no matter what I did, the footage was just a little choppy.
Right.
And so, I've said it before. You were instrumental. You had a video from a while ago where you talk about the Blackmagic Decklink, and it was really helpful because I couldn't find really anything about it. And you also did, there's something magical with some YouTubers where you answer the exact question that the person has, inadvertently, but like you just happen to approach it from that way. And there's someone else who's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I needed to know. And that was like being able to relabel each of the inputs so that you can always know what it is, and that they're persistent, which is always frustrating. So if you're an Ecamm user and you have multiple cameras and you're using Camlinks, you probably can relate to the frustration of cameras getting reassigned from session to session.
Yeah.
So this takes care of that. Yeah. With one major thing.
Yeah, which we'll get onto in a second. So
Yes.
I was the same problem. So I had the same issue. I had, I think I've got originally I had an Intel Mac. So before I switched to Apple Silicon, I had this Intel Mac, and it ran Ecamm fine until a few versions that were updated within Ecamm. And then as you start to bring new features in, obviously that's going to start putting more processor power. And my poor old iMac, its fan would just kick in and you couldn't hear anything. It was like, it was fully maxed out. It was just getting too hot. Coupled the fact that you've got then a Camlink plugged into it, you're running Ecamm, it's an Intel-based Mac, Rosetta's running in the background. All these things are just kicking it off. So I decided to upgrade and go for an M1 Studio. I thought, well, I want something to be future-proofed, and I keep my Macs a long time. That iMac I had was 6-7 years old. So I put some extra memory in it, and that was it, because you could do that back then. You could change little memory, RAM chips out and things like that. But with this M1 Max, and that was only the M1 at the time, the M2 hadn't come out. So I thought, well, I'll just go for that. And then everything's been, touch wood, everything's been fine. But still, the same problem as you. I wanted a couple of cameras, and I plugged in the Camlinks, and I had a USB hub as well. And it wasn't working for me. Either they would freeze, they would just stop working altogether, where you have to unplug them back in, even freezing just mid-video or something, for no apparent reason. There's no reason why it would or should freeze. I'm not doing anything different. We're just talking like we're doing, and then next minute the whole thing would just freeze up. So that was an issue. And I researched and thought, well, what's the alternative? So I had a look, and then I think I saw somebody on YouTube who just talked about the Decklink. I wasn't sure. They were getting, I think it was there's different types of these Decklink quads. I can go on to look at that in a second, with the SDI connections and things, a bit more high end. But I just wanted one for multiple inputs. And Elgato does one. They do a 4-port HDMI PCIe card that isn't Mac compatible. It's just PC only. So I'm thinking, okay. And it's a little bit cheaper than the Decklink quad. Not that much, but then, that was an option for me. So there's no way I could get that. So like you, took the plunge, and then found this card to be great. It didn't stutter, was assignable, as we said. And I thought, well, I'll make a video, because a lot of people are probably going to want to do this at some point and get an enclosure and think. Now, unlike you, I didn't have an enclosure, so that was another bit of research. Which enclosure do I get? And there's so many out there, but these enclosures are really expensive as well for what they are. They're a fan, they're an aluminium enclosure, and they've got a little bit of a circuit board in, which, let's be honest, is just a few slots and a couple of Thunderbolt connections, and that's it. You don't, you still have to buy the Thunderbolt cables. They're crazy expensive, especially if you're buying Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4, with a high bit rate. So anyway.
And a length that could support what we
my
are going
gosh,
to talk about.
Yeah. So like you, got the card, was really happy with it, fired it up, and then this noise was coming out of it. Oh. I'm like, what is that, and why? Where is it coming from? Because I know we spoke about this before, but I'm a person that likes to have quite a quiet environment. Like you, if we're working, we don't want fan noise. I think, as I said to you the other day, my Mac 1, my M1 Mac, as a little whisper, that's loud enough for me. If I could get
Right.
away with putting that somewhere, I would. But I'm not going to bother with that. If that would just taking it to the nth degree. But these cards, though, the HDMI quad cards from Decklink, do have a noisy fan on them. And
Yes.
just tell me a little bit about your sort of recent experience then, because I did mention that, I think, when you were asking me about the card. I said, well, they can be a little bit noisy, but maybe not to the extent of what sort of you found.
Well, it's okay. So same. The Decklink was kind of the last. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna drop the money for this. It was, I think, $580, which is not cheap. And like you said, the only reason why I really put serious consideration into it is because I already had an enclosure from the Magewell card that I showed you earlier. And I remember you telling me about the sound, and you bring up a really important and interesting point that I think people need to consider. There's ambient sound. There's two impacts, so to speak. The first is with your recording. So if I have some sort of constant, maybe low frequency sound, if my mic is sensitive enough, it might pick it up. Now, I have a Rodecaster Pro 2, so do you, has a noise gate. Pretty much most respectable audio devices should have some sort of a noise gate. So
Right.
in that component, that side of things, we could in theory mitigate it. All for it. And I still need to do a better job of configuring my Rodecaster Pro 2 for that. But the other thing that doesn't get maybe thought about as much, and that is your sanity. And so I've messaged you numerous times how I'm on the verge of losing my mind, because when I record for my YouTube channel, whether it's live without a guest,
Right.
or
Yeah.
whether it's just a video, I don't have anything in my ears. I don't monitor anything. I don't want to. I don't. It takes a certain dimension away from me when I'm editing. I like to hear my voice, but not through
Right.
any
Yeah.
sort of speaker in my ear. I just want to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have anything in my ear, which means I hear everything around me. If it's a consistent low frequency effect, like a fan, which I've even installed a brand new fan to see if I can mitigate it. It's probably just the way this house was wired, but even at this setting here, there's a low frequency hum. I don't know if you can hear it, but the Decklink, even with this, let's even just, because like you said, when you're dealing with a Decklink through an enclosure, you have two fans. The enclosure has a fan,
Right.
and the Decklink has a fan right on top of I assume it's a heatsink. The Sonnet enclosure fan is just I would equate it to a white noise sound. It's just like a consistent pushing air. And at first I thought that was the problem. So I ordered another Sonnet enclosure, replaced everything. This was just, I don't know if I even told you this. Replaced everything, and sure enough.
So I didn't realize you replaced the enclosure as well.
I replaced the enclosure as well to see. And the enclosure was not the issue. The Decklink, the problem with the Decklink fan is that it, at least for me, it outputs this higher pitched variable frequency sound. And it's just high enough to register at the kind of high end of my hearing. And it varies, which means that my ear picks that up.
Right.
And it's not like I am not an audiophile. You know that. Neil, you've been kind enough to you've remoted into my computer and helped me configure stuff, and I greatly appreciate that, because I don't really know. I don't pretend to know that. But it's so annoying. So I'm kind of belaboring the point. The first is ambient sounds into your recording. You can mitigate that. Ambient sounds to the naked ear, you can't do anything with it. So we've moved on to, like I said, what I have dubbed the Farriman maneuver.
So to that point, what I ended up doing, I had the same issue as you. So I couldn't stand that. I mean, my room is small anyway, and it's quite well treated from a reflections perspective. So I hate to think if it had these devices on a tiled floor or something like that, I mean, the noise would just be worse. clearly. But it's, I mean, not to take anything away from what you said, the fan noise is noisy enough to be distracting. And that's the problem. And it was quite a shock. I was quite disappointed. We spent all this money on this enclosure and this card, only to fire it up and think, well, it's going to go quiet in a minute. Surely it's just, just let it warm up and it'll go quiet.
Right.
No. So I had a couple of options, and I was thinking, and I know we spoke about this, but I thought, okay, well, I've done a lot of PC stuff in the past. I'll just change the fan. And then common sense kicked in. And it's like, I am not going to take a soldering iron to a $500 card that I've only just bought, because that warranty is done, right? If anything goes wrong with it, you're never going to get any warranty on that. So I thought, well, what other options do I have? And I thought, okay, well, I've got to move it somewhere. But with that comes its own challenges, because not only do you have a Thunderbolt cable going from your Mac to the card, that's relatively short. You only get maybe a meter, like 3 foot, right. Maybe even shorter than that, maybe a 1.5 foot cable that comes with them. So you had to go out and buy a new one of those. And then all my cameras are scattered around. There's one here, one over there, and one there. And normally they're just, again, 2 or 3 feet HDMI cables. They're not cheap. So what I ended up doing, long story short, is drilling a hole through the wall. Unfortunately, my room is in an attic, so it's sort of, the space comes down and then it's sort of sectioned like this, and behind one of the walls is storage space. So it's just a small little wooden batten that they've put up and made that. So it's not really drilling through concrete or anything. So I ended up drilling a hole, putting all my cables and routing those cables from the studio, and the Decklink is now in basically a cupboard. And if you're really quiet and I put my ear to the wall, I can hear it. But that's, as far as I'm concerned, I've eliminated all the noise. And to Brian's point, it looks like you did something similar. So I'm going to show the photograph that you kindly sent me. And I guess just to labor this point, you really didn't have any long cables to start with, right? So you were starting at a point where, okay, the Decklink is as far away from my system as possible, but it's still not in a cupboard, and you don't have obviously a wall to drill through and go into another room like I have. So you have a sort of a storage cupboard that you've decided to put your Decklink in. Is that right? It's effectively a storage cupboard, isn't it? Show the photo.
It is.
Here.
So this is a bedroom. And this is a spare bedroom that I converted into the office. And there's that door that you see there. That's just kind of like a folding door. That's a closet. But I turned that into like I have a 65-inch TV. So in that closet is my TV on TV stand, and just like spare, like all my camera gear's in there and stuff. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if so I did have Thunderbolt cables are funny. They come in very specific sizes, and generally, like you said, there's the default 3 foot, and then there's like a 6.6 foot, and then there's a newer 10 foot, which is like $160 that Apple actually sells.
It's 10 foot? I didn't even know they made one. That's crazy.
Yeah, yep, there is. And I was like, let me see if the 6 foot one can at least get from, because my routing is also kind of odd. I have this Apple Pro Display XDR, so this is powered by Thunderbolt. That's the only option to power it. So, I'm even giving myself a headache. Everything goes through the CalDigit. I have a CalDigit TS4 Thunderbolt dock, and I'm very I'm not neurotic. I'm kind of the whole value proposition of a dock like this, which is not cheap, is that one cable goes to your computer and everything that's connected to it is good to go. And so I have this like stubbornness of plugging anything directly into my laptop, with the exception of the TS4 dock. So the display, the Apple display, has to go all the way into the closet, and then connects to the Sonnet enclosure, which is where the Blackmagic card is. And then that enclosure has daisy chain support. So basically, it's kind of like, HDMI in and then HDMI out. A Thunderbolt comes in from the display, and then from the display into the enclosure, and then from the enclosure back to the Thunderbolt the CalDigit dock. For some reason, even though the CalDigit dock has 2 Thunderbolt ports on it on the back, if I run the monitor to the dock via Thunderbolt and then the enclosure to the dock via Thunderbolt, only one will work. However, if I daisy chain them, both work. So it's this kind of weird trial and error. But in that, as you saw in that photo, I had 2 6.6 foot Thunderbolt cables, and I last week also bought 2 10-foot HDMI to micro HDMI cables. So those were plenty long. And so yeah, I put it in there. And on top of that, one thing I failed to mention about that Decklink fan noise, yesterday I called Blackmagic, their support in the US. And the guy was super nice, the support agent. And I just bought this card less than 2 weeks ago from Amazon. And he said, he basically was like, listen, just return it and buy another one. Because we both went onto the Blackmagic support forum, which is a really good forum on their website.
Right.
And we did find a handful of people who were complaining about a high-pitched hum from specifically the quad HDMI recorder.
Right.
And so not prevalent enough for it to be something that is like some sort of a problem, like a major problem. But yeah, he was like, just return it and buy a new one. So it's actually going to be delivering today, the replacement, and I'll go through and, pull out the enclosure again. And yeah, but to your point, like putting it in there, it's not fully soundproofed. It's not true. Yeah, there you go. It's not soundproofed or anything,
right.
But it pretty much mitigated the entire issue, which I'm grateful for. And it's a big enough room. There's plenty, the enclosure itself is not like sitting on the carpet, as you can see there. So it has room for airflow for the fan to push out air. But I don't hear anything. And that to me is great. And it kind of is, maybe, if it could segue into like what we talked about last night and what we even talked about, like Neil and I talk a lot about this stuff. For anyone who's curious, like
we do. I just want to ask you a quick question first, real quick though, about about these cables. Sure. So this looks like a washing line here at the top because it's very taut. So are you planning to get some longer and just maybe because that's not easy to, because you got, how many cables you got? So you got 1, 2, 3. So you got the HDMI and then you've got the Thunderbolt cable, right? Because you've got the camera cables connected, of course.
Yes, so the topmost cable that you say is taut, that is the Thunderbolt cable from the Pro Display XDR
right.
to, and it's pretty much like it's not like on the back of the of the display. It's not like the cable's bent at a 90-degree angle. It's got room, and in fact, it has a little bit more room since I took this photo, because I've since even moved the display closer to the closet to make room for the prompter here. And then below that are 2 HDMI cables, and then there's another Thunderbolt cable that has a lot more slack because it's closer. That's the one that's connected to the CalDigit. And then at the very bottom there, those are just power extension cables going to the UPS that I have behind this bookshelf that you see. But I did remove. You can see that the tension arm over there. There's the Manfrotto arm and then the tension rod. I've removed, actually that tension arm, the Manfrotto, is what this camera is now using, because I decided to kind of, for now at least, even though I have the capability of 4 HDMI inputs, the truth is I just want to kind of simplify, and for now I'm just using this one camera for everything. I don't need multiple cameras, but at the very, like we talked about earlier, at the very second, future-proof. I am future-proofed with the Blackmagic card.
Yeah, so at least, and I know we've had sort of discussions as well about, which is a good segue now to say, well, if we didn't have the Blackmagic card, or you wanted to return that and replace it with something else, what choices are out there right now? So when Brian and I were talking about this, seems a long time ago, it was only yesterday, about, just time flies. I'll tell you about my monitor saga that continues later. But anyway, yeah, so what options are there? So, okay, let's say we don't want the Camlinks anymore, and for other people who are just starting out, the Decklink is overkill. If you're not using multiple cameras in your workflow, or even as I mentioned today, you could plug in a laptop or some other HDMI device, which is fine if you want to do that. What options do people have? So can't go for Camlink, Decklink Quad. So let's talk about the Streamer X from Rode, which is an option. And we spoke about this yesterday, that could maybe be the answer to at least your sort of quandary with regards to consolidation. And I was thinking of an acronym yesterday for the opposite of gear acquisition syndrome. And maybe it should be GRASS, which is gear. What would that be? That would be gear. What did I think of it now? Reduction selling and solution or something like that. Yeah, something like that. So we should be looking at gear reduction selling stuff. That's what it was called. Gear reduction selling stuff. There you go. GRASS, which is better than gas. But and consolidation, right? So getting rid of all your gear or a lot of gear. And there's another movement on YouTube, just to slightly segue. I don't know whether you've seen this as well. Some of the bigger YouTubers, not only have they quit YouTube now, which was the big thing starting this year, a lot of them are basically selling all their gear. You see these wild sort of thumbnails plastered around, and basically they're saying, we're selling all my gear. I've sold all my gear and I'm keeping one camera type of thing. So it's a lot of the Sony users who get, I think a lot of people who are advocates of Sony, especially the bigger YouTubers, do get a lot of Sony gear given to them as well as buying it themselves. So they accumulate all this gear over the years. And one guy had like 3 A7 S2s or whatever, and then he had one of the newer ones and the A7 IV or whatever. So many cameras, and he just got rid of them all and just got the A7C. Anyway, point is, for you had, or you still have, the Rodecaster Pro 2, obviously the Decklink HDMI now, and was there a way of consolidating those? And so we spoke about the Streamer X, but that is a great proposition, but obviously it comes with some issues. So I think overnight you were looking at options and did some research, because I did mention to you that initially when Rode brought them out, there was quite a high return rate because there were some issues. Whatever those issues were, people were having glitches and things with them, and it wasn't the best product in the world. So I'm curious now, what did you find in your sort of recent research even for the newer models? Because that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I saw just a little bit of a backstory to how I didn't even know the Streamer X existed until yesterday afternoon. And you and my other buddy, his name's Glenn Dewis. He's a photo educator as well, and he does a bunch of live streaming, a great weekly show. And so I reached out to him as well, and I asked, "What are you doing for your setup?" Because he also has a 1-camera setup, and that was kind of the underlying theme. Was, you see, when I think of GRASS, I think of gear reduction and simplification. What was S? Solution or strategy?
Selling,
but
strategy. Yeah, I like that.
Selling,
simplification. I think we'll use that.
So it is. That's what it is. It's simplification because, like, I have multiple Sony cameras, and I have different ways of inputting them to my computer. But with that comes, like, there is an overhead in terms of you have to make sure that each camera looks good, when you're broadcasting, and invariably, like, one camera might look good, but then the other one, if you have maybe a kind of a light in frame that doesn't work, you have to do all this like fine tuning, and that I think that turned me off. But also, honestly, for me, the biggest thing was I would have that side camera that my prompter was on, and that would be great for like the first 30, 45 second, for the intro of my YouTube videos. And then I'd come to this camera where I'd be editing on my computer, and then I just look over. But I wouldn't if I would do a live or a Zoom, for example, I'd have to do it on that camera because that's the only way I could see with the prompter. So I was like, you know what? Well, I asked Glenn, what do you do? And he said, well, I use one camera, which he does. And for him, he is of the same kind of thing as what you were saying with some of the Sony people, where Rode sent him like a Rodecaster Duo, the Streamer X, and a few, like I think the Pod Mic. So he had these things sent to him. So he was like, well, let me see what they can do. And he was the one that first told me about the Streamer X. And I was like, he's like, it's got an XLR input, which is, I only really have this and like the Rode Wireless Pro, which the Streamer X supports. And then if I'm saying that I'm only going to use one camera input, and I don't really, and worst case, if I need a second, I can always just grab a Camlink, you know, in a pinch, or I can even use my iPhone with continuity. Point is that I always fall into this trap, and I don't know if you can relate, where I have to be prepared for anything. Like I need everything set up, even if I only might use it for 30 seconds out of a production. And that doesn't make sense to me. So he told me about Streamer X.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I've got two cameras on here right now. Look, I've got the ZV-1. I've got the old GH5. I'm not using them right now, but you know.
Right. And your main camera is so tuned.
Yeah,
sure. I mean, if you have it and it doesn't affect anything, sure, go for it. But as I get older, it's so funny. Like I find myself wanting to kind of consolidate and simplify.
Yes.
So after I did some brief research on what Streamer X was, the next thing I did was I messaged you and I said, hey, do you have some time? Can I run this by you? Maybe you've heard some stuff, because the things I was seeing initially was really making me nervous about the Streamer X. Most of the videos on YouTube were people who received it from Rode. They didn't spend their money on it.
Right.
And so, you know, that kind of paints your opinion of it a little bit differently. I'm not saying that, I'm not accusing anyone of being, shady about it or kind of biasing the review in a more positive light, but it's a $400 device. And if I dropped $400, I would be quite critical about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it, on paper, it looked like the perfect thing for me. And the Decklink, I'm still in my return window, so that, you know, I wouldn't lose money in that. The Sonnet enclosure, I've had for years. It's fine. Like I said, like I ordered a new one, I tested it, I compared the old one to the new one, heard that there was no difference, so I returned the new one, and so that's been a sunk cost for years. I've had the Sonnet enclosure for years.
Yeah.
And then I also have the Rodecaster Pro 2, which is $700. And if I were to sell it, you know, I don't know, I would definitely take a loss on it, because I don't need the Rodecaster Pro 2 and the Streamer X. That defeats the whole purpose of this. But yeah, we talked, you and I yesterday, and then after we got off last night, I went and did some more research. I went onto the Rode subreddit, and that's really what really kind of soured me to the Streamer X, because I did a search for Streamer X. I sorted by new, and even new, like this thing is like 10 or 11 months old at this point, I think. Yeah. And they've had numerous firmwares, and they finally released their Unity Mac app, which allows you to do kind of like multi-input, I think, support.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, it was not a pretty picture. So that's when I messaged you this morning. I said, you know what? I don't know if it's great. It would be great to simplify if it works. But what I'm not looking forward to is taking on a whole different type of problem.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you yesterday as well. So one of the customers I work with, he was looking at that as a portable solution. So taking it out, on the road, you just have and for people who don't know, the Streamer X is a built-in capture card device, 4K, I think up to 4K 60, has pass-through HDMI. I think it's got one XLR input, one line input. So it's great just for a solo streamer. So you could take that on the road with you. You've got your capture card, you've got your audio device, you just need a mic, camera, you're good to go, and you're done. And he bought one, had a look at it, and he couldn't get the firmware to update. He got me online, and we were going through things, and he just kept repeatedly saying, unable to update firmware. And you're in that sort of a rock and a hard place, because the old firmware didn't support what you needed to work with the respective software, yet you couldn't update it to the latest firmware to get it to work. So what do you do? So the Streamer X, unfortunately, and I did do a bit more research today as well, and I read somewhere, I can't remember what it was now, where Rode may have had between a 30 and a 35% return rate on that unit.
Yikes.
That's a high return rate, because just of these issues, not because it's DOA, it's just that it wasn't able to update. So I'm curious, what were the latest sort of issues that people were seeing with, and I guess you're looking at things only maybe a few weeks, a few months ago where people are posting still. What were the issues then? I'm just curious.
So still some of the persistent issues were this hum in the headphone when you're using headphones to monitor. There's this like hum. Rode has acknowledged that. They have actually an FAQ. Again, this is from that subreddit, so that's all there.
Right.
So some people said that, and this I experienced this actually with my Rodecaster Pro 2. When I reboot my computer, the Rodecaster Pro 2 will never be recognized. I always have to reach behind and pull out the USB cable and reconnect it, and then the computer recognizes it as an input. So that the Streamer X also has issues. Some people say that it regularly loses video signal, and this happened during broadcasts where their camera feed just drops out.
Right.
So, and also there's a near universal hatred for the Unity app, which is
right.
They released this app. Originally, I think it was Windows only. Then they released a beta, and then it has now since been released to the public for Mac. And you kind of need that. That's as far as I understand, the only app that will allow you to use, for example, this XLR mic. And then if I also had my Rode Wireless Pro, to use that transmitter as well. So there's just a lot of, which is really atypical from my experience of Rode. Like I said, I've got a Rodecaster Pro 2. I had a Rodecaster Pro 1. I have the Rodecaster, the Rode Wireless Pro, and I think they do really good stuff. So it just seemed to really, maybe it was a rushed product.
Yeah, it sounds like it wasn't great. We've got a couple of comments actually from the Rockin' Round Table, and I like that name. Let me see if I can bring this comment in here a second. So the Rockin' Round Table, I have tried two different Streamer X units. Had to return both as they were not working as designed. I love the idea of it, but it didn't work. Firmware updates failed, rebooted randomly. See, and this is the problem that my customer had. So thanks so much for stopping by and telling us that. He also mentioned that the just dropped connection with the computer, tried it one on Windows machine, 2 different Macs, gave up. I mean, you would give up, wouldn't you? I mean, if you tried it on 2 different machines. And my customer did the same thing. He had a different Mac, tried it on there. He doesn't have a Windows machine. And Rockin' says, using a Duo now, it works great. And that's a great unit, right?
Yes, and you and I talked about this. The only reason why I have the Rodecaster Pro 2 is because the Duo did not exist when I sold my first Rodecaster Pro. Yeah, I would have loved the Duo. Duo would have been perfect. It would have. Yeah. So there are other. Well, go ahead. Yeah, like we were. No.
I think it's interesting to see they've still got problems, and this FAQ. I mean, a hum in the headphone. That obviously just sounds like some electromagnetic interference. It's not maybe well shielded. And I think to your point about it being a rush product, I think other people were coming out with similar devices, and somebody spoke to me the other day about Mackie, which is now owned. Yes. Sorry, Mackie owned. Does Mackie own Rode, or did Rode buy Mackie?
No,
I can't remember.
Rode bought Mackie.
Right. So they've got a device that's similar. I think they've got a smaller all-in-one mixer with a capture card in there. Yes. And I was about to suggest that to you, but I have no experience in it, and I don't know whether that is a potential option. I know it's not Rode, but it still has, I think, processing in it, but it is cheaper. I think it's maybe $100-150 cheaper than the Streamer X, but I'm sure there are some things that are missing in it, and I need to have a look online to see if anybody's done a review, because I'd be interested to see the comparison between the Streamer X and this device. One, is it more reliable? And two, does it still include all the bells and whistles with regard to audio processing? Because that's a real benefit of the Roadcasters. I had somebody talking to me today about, should I get a Roadcaster? I said, well, the only reason I've got one is I didn't want to have all the processing in terms of either noise reduction, noise gate, compressors, whatever you need for your audio workflow to be on the computer, because that's system overhead, you're having to use plugins, there's latency, you're just adding all these things to the system. So I'd rather have an outboard device that will take care of all the audio stuff and then just bring in the signal into Ecamm or whatever I'm using. So that's why I've got one. Plus, I do music on the side, so I like plugging in keyboards and things like that. And my wife does a video podcast as well, so I've got her hooked up directly into the Rodecaster. I don't have to keep switching cables. So it's a convenience thing. But if the Duo had come out when I bought it, same as you, I would have gone for that.
And what you just said actually makes the case for something like, I would say, the Blackmagic, the Decklink, versus something like even a Camlink, where you had said that you would rather have a dedicated, in this case here, the Rodecaster Pro 2, which is no slouch. It has a dedicated audio processing. It takes that stress off of your computer. The same exact thing can be said about from the video side. So,
Absolutely.
Yes, this does have a, it does video processing to a degree, but when I saw the quality of the video on that, earlier I referenced the one that I published a few weeks ago, where it was just, and I saw it before I published it. I mean, it was there in the editor.
Sure.
I just, I couldn't, I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. So when I got the Decklink and I did my last week's video, that was the first video I broadcasted with that. I mean, it was night and day. Even I mentioned how I jumped on a video chat with my buddy Glenn. He even, without telling him that I got the Decklink or anything, he made a comment of how much better my video looks. And that's what I'm using right now. The camera's connected. It does. It's smooth, and there's no jitteriness that I experienced when I was using the Camlink. Now, granted, I was using two Camlinks. I fully own up to that. But the point is that is where you will see, I think, one of the biggest dividends is by getting an external device that has enough processing chops to handle the bandwidth, so to speak, so that all your computer has to do is ingest it, So,
and it's Thunderbolt as well, so it's a pretty fast connection. And I think the Decklinks will take up to, you can have 4K 60 feeds coming in, right? I think it'll, and I love the way that you can look on the Decklink app and see the resolution and frame rate that's coming into each one. So you know that it's correct, because I had a problem with one of the cameras. I think it was this one, and for some reason it's a bit dark on this side, but for some reason this camera was coming in at 1080p 60, and I'm like, well, why is it doing that? And it was basically a misconfiguration on the HDMI output setting, because this camera, even though it's a ZV-1, and even though you can use USB, and we'll talk about that in a sec, it uses micro HDMI, but it's still got the signal to be able to up to 4K 30, I think, output. So it's like, why am I getting 1080? But I wouldn't have known that without actually having the Decklink to tell me what I'm getting, because you think, okay, well, it's fine. So anyway, and you're right. So having that separate device is great.
It is, and to the Rodecaster, the Pro 2 and the Duo and the original Rodecaster Pro, unlike the Streamer X, you don't have a display to show your levels. So now it'll show it in the Unity app on your computer, but I do like being able to kind of see right away, like whether an input is getting a signal, so that where you see your lines up and down. Right. And I was telling you yesterday, I was trying to see if there's a way I can get that on my Stream Deck to see, because it has so many plugins, but I couldn't figure it out.
Unfortunately, not. No, not at the moment. I guess the Unity app doesn't have. You said it doesn't have the because I never really use it. It doesn't have the levels.
It does have the live.
Oh, it does. You can see
Like,
them.
yeah.
Okay.
I remember,
Are they in real
based
time
on just
there?
a few quick things. I believe
Right.
so. I haven't downloaded it, so but I do
No.
believe so. Unlike the Road Central app, which does not.
No, that's just for syncing and tweaking and stuff like that. And it's frustrating because you can adjust all the parameters. And we went through this, right,
Correct.
when we're doing this
Yes.
with your system. It does all the parameters, yet you're not getting any of that feedback to show you whether your levels
Yeah.
are correct. So you're just blindly guessing. I mean, it does make a difference, but yeah, it's not changing. And that is frustrating. So, I mean, other options, obviously, if people didn't want to use a capture card at all, some of the newer cameras, specifically the Sony ones, because we all love Sony. I never thought I'd ever say that, actually, coming from a Panasonic background. But, times have changed.
Yeah.
With autofocus specifically. But anyway, so some of the cameras will allow you to output via USB. So it serves two purposes. One, it's charging the camera because you've got a USB connector on the actual camera itself, and you can output to a certain frame rate. And what's crazy about some of the frame rates that are available is for example, I'm using the Sony A7 IV, which is the mirrorless hybrid camera. And if you look at what you can output on the USB, you can output 1080 up to 30 frames a second, I think. Maybe even 60, but I think 30 at the max via USB. So that's okay. And then if you wanted to go 4K, it'll output at 4K at 15 frames a second. And that's it. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what use case that would be useful for.
No.
And I think it's a limitation of USB too. I think it's just the amount of data, the bit rate that you can send through that cable and its specifications limits the output resolution of the camera. So unfortunately, if you wanted to do a 4K stream, then you'd have to still opt for a capture card. But the good news is, I mean, if people didn't want to spend any money on a capture card and they're happy with 1080p up to 30 frames a second, then don't bother. Just make sure your camera has the ability to output via USB. And I know I've seen a few people do a couple of comparisons. They've plugged a capture card in and they've used USB-C. And is there a difference? There is a little bit of a color shift, and I've noticed that as well. And I wanted to ask you that question, actually, while we're here. Nothing to do with the Decklinks. The Decklinks are pretty much what you see is what you get, right? So from a color shift perspective, I don't think there's anything there. These guys have a slight color shift. If you could split your signal and put your cameras side by side, have one camera feeding both the Decklink and this, you'd probably notice that there's a little bit of a color shift with the Camlink. And I've also noticed that video that is coming into Ecamm, and it's not, and I'm not knocking Ecamm here, there is definitely a color shift in the difference between what you see on not on the screen. If you were to record internally in your camera, and I know there's complexities with color space and color depth and things like that, whether you're recording 422 10-bit versus whatever is coming into Ecamm, but there is definitely, I have to do quite a little bit of tweaking. I'm quite sort of anal retentive regarding that, because I took a capture directly out of my Sony card, put it into Final Cut, and then looked at the waveform and vector scope to make sure my skin tone was looking okay. And then I recorded directly into Ecamm and took the same video and put it side by side. And it's quite a marginal shift. There's a hue shift in Ecamm for whatever reason when it comes in. And it may be just because of the codec that it's being used to record. I don't know. I don't know whether you ever noticed this, where you've had to tweak a little bit, either some of your colors, or do you just bring in, because your colors are fine, you're very natural and there's nothing off about your colors at all. But have you tweaked anything within either your camera or Ecamm to get it to look how it does?
No. I mean, so within the camera, I used to, and I used to film in log. This is when you were talking earlier about how you would you just film directly to the SD card and then bring your, yeah, I used to do that too. And I would film the log and then I would apply a lot to refine it. And that was, I think the first step in terms of like simplification, where I was like, listen, I'm not putting out some cinematic masterpiece. I'm putting out a tutorial on how to use Lightroom. So,
right.
And people aren't watching it for me. So I'm going to minimize myself on the display.
Right.
I'm just going to focus on Lightroom. So
Yeah.
no, so that in that case, that was the one time where I adjusted the, I guess the color space to a lot on my camera. Since then though, I don't. I use ScreenFlow. We've talked about this, like for my YouTube production. All of my inputs go into ScreenFlow, and then I just edit in ScreenFlow. Again, simplified. It gets the job done. No one's ever complained about video quality or audio quality because of ScreenFlow. Yeah. However, with Ecamm, I was actually considering, because Ecamm does support LUTs, and I was thinking about seeing what that would be like to set the camera back into S-Log and apply a LUT, because that would give you the greatest amount of control. But no, to answer a long answer to a short question, I don't really notice it. Again, I'm also red-green colorblind, so like things like skin tone, I don't pay too close of attention to. Right. I appreciate that you, like, I do, like, I know that I have this one one of my Elgato key lights is warmer than the other, just to kind of shoot some warmer light behind me.
Yeah. No, I think it looks.
No, I don't.
I think it looks great. Yeah, and it's a personal choice. And just out of interest, what picture profile do you currently shoot in right now? Your video, do you know what it's
on the camera?
Yeah,
I think it's the default.
So it's like
it might be
neutral or
0
standard or something like that, or
because
there's picture profiles and then there's the picture styles, and I think what I'm shooting in is S-Cinetone, I think, something like that.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and then I can just tweak it because S-Cinetone gives nice skin tones in my experience, just with filming and things. But yeah, I've spent hours. I mean, what else would you do? Trying to get your color looking right. But it's quite important because I was learning videography and things like that, and I had to learn about color space and LUT transforms and Rec 709 and all this thing to make your image. Because I was like, why are people shooting in? Well, it was Vlog back in the Panasonic days. And like, why would you do that? Yep. And obviously get you better dynamic range and you've got more control. But I think it would be an interesting experiment. I was thinking about doing 2 experiments as well, similar to you. One, just switching on S-Log, throwing in a LUT, of which I bought way too many LUTs over the years, just for the sake of messing around with it. But you got to have a transform LUT first to get it into the Rec 709 color space, because if you threw on like a wedding LUT, for example, then it would be all over the place. But you can only apply one LUT. You see, that's the thing with Ecamm. You can't.
Oh, right. That's right. You can't layer
as long
them.
as you've got a good transform LUT to go into Rec 709 and get it to the right color space, then you should be okay. And then you can tweak the colors later in Ecamm's camera effects. But it would be an interesting experiment. What I do find though is, if I'm shooting in log, then obviously you've got base ISO ratings as well. And I think base ISO in Sony is 800, and my ISO at the moment is 120. So I'd have to put an ND filter on if I want to keep the same. And here we go again, exposure triangle all over again. So
exactly why I stopped. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to do it. I was the same. I was like, and then S-Log, you have to technically overexpose by maybe 1 or 1.5 stops, just because of the shadows, and you get noise, and it's like, is it really worth it? Should be shooting log indoors? That's a topic for another day, I think. Maybe I should.
Should you be for a live stream or for a video tutorial? That's what I never got. I see some YouTubers who are using like red cinema cameras for their YouTube channel, like
it's
$20,000-$30,000 cameras. It is, and great. I'm not knocking it. It just I'm not going to try to. It is overkill. I'm not going to chase that. That is one. It's just it's if that was like if I was making a serious income off of it,
Yeah.
But my I generally subscribe to the philosophy that content will always perform. Well, that's the difference maker. The subject, the content. People will be more than forgiving if your resolution is lower. Maybe your picture quality is not locked in. I mean, they'll be less forgiving about your audio. But if you provide the content that either interests them or educates them or distracts them, that's all that's what I focus on most of all.
Yeah, I agree. So I did post a comment and asked people about, where's my button? About what capture card they're using right now. So School of Prophecy, another great name, has said Camlink. So I'm interested, have you had any issues, School of Prophecy, with your Camlink using it? I mean, a lot of people swear by them, right? You see some of the gamer channels and things like that, and they're all over Camlinks, and it's fine. And I think, I mean, even my youngest does workflows on bit of streaming here and there and things, and Elgato it seems to be an option for gamers, right? I mean, it's just firmly in the gamer market. So Camlinks or the HX60 or something. There's lots of different ones, like the outboard ones. Oh, and so School of Prophecy said they only use one of them, which is fine, and they have no problems. Well, thanks for letting us know that, but it's interesting. And Ecamm and Camlink works well for me. Yeah, and it's, if you are using just a single Camlink and you haven't got multiple ones connected and your machine isn't overtaxed with whatever you've got running on it, then yeah, I think it's a useful, easy and cheap device. And I think what's interesting is I've heard some live streamers actually have a dedicated live streaming setup. Just the machine that they use is only for the live streaming software and has nothing else on it. I mean, I think the Mac M1 specifically, and this might be specific to PCs where they need to have a dedicated machine for live streaming, especially if they're pushing, high-res gaming video through it or something. But I've never had any problems, touch wood, with the M1 Max Studio having sort of running out of resources. So I don't know, what you use the same? You've got an M1 Studio, have you, or an M2 or something? Or
I have a 16-inch M2 Max with 64 gigs of RAM. Like, this computer is not a slouch.
Right.
And granted, like I said, I have everything going through a CalDigit.
Right.
Oh, well, I shouldn't even say that because there's more to it than that. Like, I sent you that video. Yeah, you saw the video. Yeah.
I can't put that online because it's too distressful. And it's too, everybody would be distressed. Yeah.
Yeah, people would be like, this man is mad.
What's he doing? Velcro? What?
Yeah. I am Velcroing SSD drives to the back of my display, just because I don't want to see them, but I need them, and so So for me, it was surprising because Elgato just, I think it was like in the past month or two, they made this whole big thing about updating their capture cards and stuff, and I was fully expecting. I mean, we are long due for an update, even if it's. I mean, I would like to see it as USB-C, but like even if it just it improved the hardware components of it inside, that would be great. And I sent a tweet or a post or whatever we call it now, but to the product manager at Elgato, because they have a quad HDMI card, which you referenced earlier, that isn't Mac capable. Now, clearly that's possible. Blackmagic shows that it's possible with, a really elegant driver that sits in the Apple system preferences. Like, why wouldn't you? And I asked, well, can you do this? And he said, yeah. He's like, he said something, it was non-committal, but it wasn't no. It was
I don't see
let me
why
look
not.
into this.
Yeah, it may be because most of the people that use the hardware are PC related
Yes.
gamers, because
Yes.
and I think that's, you got to go for the market that you basically people are buying from you. So why not
Right.
go to that? But I think the Mac community isn't a small community anymore. There's a lot more Mac users than there used to be 15 years ago, which is interesting. And School of Prophecy says they have a M1 MacBook Pro 16-inch. Again, not a slouch of a machine. I think the M1 machines are really, really good anyway. So again, it just depends what you're pushing to the system. Speaking of Elgato, nice segue. Just for a few more minutes. I don't know how you're doing for time, but if you're all right for another sort of 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's take a quick look at Chrome. So I thought this would be interesting just as an exercise, because I've not been on their website, only for downloading drivers and complaining. That's my usual way of going to Elgato. So I've noticed the scene should be the opposite way. You and I should be both on the left.
Oh,
I'm
really?
looking. Well, see, if I'm looking here,
Right.
that looks odd. I should be looking over there. But because I've no monitor, I have to look here. So,
Which is
I'm looking
another
at,
story.
Yeah, another story. I don't think I've got time for that. Well, I'll talk to you maybe offline about that at some point. Anyway, so find the capture card. Let's go. So let's get started. So what are we using it for? We're using it for a camera. And oh, look at that. See, they got Windows laptop, Windows desktop, and a Mac. That's it. Okay, so for Camlink 4K then. God, 129 euros. They're not cheap. Is that it?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
So the new cards that they've come up with, I'm confused now. So the new capture cards that they've come up with, they don't. Let me just go back to this.
Well, it's just they have a capture card that is HDMI pass through at like 4K maybe 120.
Right.
For gamers, I don't know if it works. Obviously, so there's that thing that has not been updated, if I remember correctly.
This is brand new, apparently. There's two of these. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, there's two. If you just look here under capture, you've got the new one, and then there's this HD 60X, which hasn't been updated. You're right, for like forever.
Okay.
But this is new, but I don't believe this is compatible with the Mac, which is bonkers.
No.
Because it's just a USB-C device. If you look, it's just USB-C. So why?
Let's see this. The 4KX you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to the. I'm in Safari
Oh,
now
I
too,
might
just to
be
see.
wrong here, but let's look at support then.
No, I mean software, 4K capture utility, Windows only, Windows only, Windows only. Let me do a keyword search for Mac. Oh no, plug and play.
interesting.
It says it works Windows, Mac, iPad.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
yeah, so
Wonder
I
why
mean,
they didn't
but
give us
this
a
is-
choice then.
it says 4K up to 144 frames per second. So this is clearly for, a gamer who wants to pass through, say, like a PlayStation
Yeah.
5 or an Xbox. Or for me, I feel like this is the wrong. I don't know. Even though it is more than half the price, or less than half the price of a Decklink.
But it
I
only
don't-
has two capture cards, right? Is it two inputs? Quick with
No, it's
HDMI
input
2.1.
HDMI in, HDMI out, and that's it.
Oh, it's just a pass. So it's just So it doesn't even
just
provide you
pass-through.
with the.
Yep.
Okay, well that's not good then.
No, and
Well,
then
not
there's
for- no,
the
yeah.
PCIe card, which is same thing. It's a HDMI pass-through. That does 8K 60, but that's PC only.
Yeah, this is the new one. This
if
guy
I-
here, the 4K Pro, right?
Right.
Oh, not that one. You're talking about the 4-port one. Is there a 4-port? Oh, the
Well,
Camlink
so
Pro.
there is a 4-port one. That one hasn't been updated in. That's the one that I asked the product manager, like, hey, this would be beautiful to have. I mean, it looks really nice. Like it has kind of like an enclosure to it.
Yeah, and it's $200
and-
bucks cheaper than the Decklink as it stands. Oh, look,
Yes.
I've got my
And
glow on the screen because I've got a white.
See? Yep. Yep.
Oh dear.
Well, if you do, then I should do as well.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, yours is
Yeah.
better. But yeah.
Yeah, I would love to have this. Like, it would be nice to have.
The Elgato, right?
Well, actually, yeah, they'll 2160 30 frame by 30p for that 4-port.
Okay.
So
That's still pretty good, though.
yeah, again, it's just one of those things where it would have been great to have that as a Mac compatible, but it's not. So and that's fine. I'm like, I get it, and I would push back on people who, you know, like Apple has been working and doing a really good job of working with game publishers, you know, to release games, if not 0 day, but then close. And you know, you cannot argue the unified architecture of their Apple Silicon, like especially with the M3 Pro, M3 Max, and even M3. I mean, it's ridiculous. So
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, this M2 Max, I expect it to last me a good long while. I don't see any reason that I need to upgrade to an M3 or anything like that.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So
yeah, I'm hoping so. Anyway, just another quick question that came in, not sort of related to this, but at least a question that I haven't played with it. So there's been a new Facecam 2 that's come out from Elgato, and I've seen a couple of reviews. And it doesn't look terrible from what I've seen. I bought a Facecam 1 originally for my wife to do Zoom calls and things, and because she had a Mac, but the Mac camera wasn't the best at the time, and doing a lot of Zoom calls, you know, you want to have a reasonable image. And I was thoroughly disappointed with the Facecam 1. I could not get the thing to really look how I wanted it to look. I think it had some real issues with its color balance, its white balance specifically. Just generally, it wasn't a very good camera in my opinion. Even though it had a fixed focal length, it had a fixed aperture, I think of a f2, I think something like that. So it did have give you a little bit of a blurry background, but it just wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was the processor, the sensor, something like that. It just wasn't a great addition, and I just couldn't really get it to look decent. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've no desire or any need to look at a Facecam 2, but from what I've seen, they've really taken some feedback, I think, from the purchasing audience and decided to upgrade and do something better with the Facecam 2. But yeah, not sure.
yeah, I've got they have a comparison on their product page between the Facecam 2, the Facecam Pro, and the Facecam Mark 1. And so we're just going from the Mark 1 to Mark 2. They share the same resolution, HD 60. The new one supports HDR. They're both fixed focus, slightly narrower field of view, same aperture, same fixed aperture, f2.4. But it does have it has a focal range, same. I mean, it looks, for the most part, I would say just maybe the image processing is improved. I don't know if the actual optics themselves have, the lens itself has improved. I would assume it would have, but you know, the Facecam, there are a few, like there's the Insta360 that's on the PTZ, you know, that little that's an interesting one. Ultimately, what it boils down to for me, why I'm not using one of those versus a camera is, it boils down to pure physics. One, obviously, if you already have the camera and the lens, but you'll never be able to compete with having, for example, even a crop sensor or a full frame sensor, as is the case on this A7 III, with a dedicated lens with multiple glass elements, and just the sheer power of a dedicated, in this case, mirrorless camera. It's just no webcam can compete. With that said, that is not for everyone because it requires additional hardware in some cases, depending on your camera. So a webcam can be a great alternative. And I have seen some test footage on X where people from Elgato were sharing, and it looked really good. It's just you're going to rely more on computational photography, where a lot of the stuff will be done in software.
Yeah.
Simply because, So that's totally great. I love that they're really trying to push it more, and it looks larger than the previous one, which is I'm always a fan of. If it's larger, then in theory it should have a little bit more, maybe better internals,
better sensor or something. Yeah.
Better. Yeah.
I think
So-
it comes back to as you mentioned, it is a dilemma. So if you're doing, depending what you're trying to do, so I think there's three distinct sort of markets at the moment. Maybe there's more. I haven't thought this through, by the way. I'm just randomly throwing out ideas. There's the gamer market who want a quick route to market in terms of I need audio for my gameplay. I need to be able to be seen as I'm playing the game, and I also want to be able to capture my gameplay and live stream it. So you've got that audience that's looking for something quick and easy. They don't want to have the learning curve of setting stuff up. They don't have the expense of buying expensive gear and then plugging everything in and so on. So it's almost a plug and play market. So I think they've got that market. Then in the middle, you've got the people that want to level up their Zoom teams and other workflows. So in the sort of the professional industry now, where we're looking at getting better quality videos, because as I was listening to Pat Flynn and other people, we were talking about podcasts and stuff. Everybody's got a decent microphone now. You can buy a good sounding microphone for $30. And that's something I'm going to be reviewing soon as well. Watch this space to have a mess around with that. But so it's less forgiving now. There's no really excuse to have bad audio on a Zoom call. But for cameras, I think there's still people that don't seem to value the presentation of what you look like in a Zoom or Teams environment. So I think there's still an area of growth and education for that group. And then there's the other side where there's people like ourselves who are doing tutorials, live streams like this, where we're trying to talk to an audience and provide value and so on. And if you're in a professional setting where you expect to get paid for certain things, then I think there's a level there as well. So
Agreed.
That was 3 levels, wasn't it? So maybe we need to look at the middle level of people. So anyway, as we start to wrap up, because we're getting, I can't believe we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes already, but this is always fun when we're talking. On Tuesday, I had an idea of a topic. I know we're still live, but I thought, could we talk about what's in our camera bags when we go out and start shooting stuff?
Sure.
Because you are a landscape photographer, and obviously you will have a set of gear that you will take out with you all the time. And just like me, I don't want to take everything with me. So you have to make choices about what's in your camera bag, depending on what you're going to do. But there's also that, for me anyway, there's also that caveat whereby, well, what if I wanted to shoot X? Do I have that with me? Should I bring this with me? So I thought it'd be a really interesting topic, because I've got my own sort of weird things that I want to take, and we inevitably end up taking sometimes way too much gear and never use it. We can talk about that. Yep. But I'd be interested to know, what's your sort of grab bag, if you like? If you had a go bag and it was ready to go, and you wanted to go and take some stuff and shoot some stills, what would your camera bag look like? So if you're up for that, I think that would be a great topic. Because I'd like to get to know more about your line of work and photography, because it's something I'm not familiar with in terms of, that's not my profession. I don't do that. So I'm really interested in your line of work and the types of things that sort of you get involved with. And at a pinch, questions like, if you only had one lens and one camera, what would you take? So those are the types of things I'd like to talk about for next Tuesday, which would be fun. And I'll update the thumbnail to say, what's in my camera bag, because it's nice to have the different topics, I think, so people can at least see what we're talking about. So
absolutely.
Thank you again, Brian, for joining. And for people who don't know how to get hold of Brian, he is available at this link here. And I always put the link in the descriptions as well. It's a pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. And it's just fun to talk about gear. I could talk about gear for a long time. I don't think my internet could keep going. I'd probably run out of hard drive space for recording before we finish talking. But anyway, just a very quick update of the monitor situation. It hasn't been delivered. I've asked for my money back. I'm going to go somewhere else. So that's long story short. It's still an empty space here. I've got a void to my. I'll just show you. It's empty. There's nothing here at all. So I have no monitor. Look, there's cables hanging out. That's it. It's very depressing, Brian. It's very depressing.
I feel it in my soul for you.
Thank you. The thing is as well, and maybe a topic for another day, monitor choices for your workflow, because I can't go. I've had a 32-inch monitor here for like 2.5 years, the BenQ monitor, which unfortunately failed, as we spoke about. I can't go to a 27-inch monitor now. I just can't. I can't bring myself to go back. So I'll put that in as another topic for us, because monitor choice is very important, particularly color accuracy. And when you're editing photographs, you want what you edit to be compatible with, high-end monitors and to look good, especially when you're printing, right? When you could, and that's another question. Do you print a lot of your own photography? Zero. Interesting.
Yep.
Maybe that's a topic for a conversation like, why don't you? But anyway, maybe all these topics, I'll write them down. All right. Well, anyway, thank you again for joining. I'll just sign off, and I'll be right back with you in a second when I end the show. So thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for the questions. We'll see you next week. Take it easy.